Aaliyah Johnson's hands were covered in blood when the doctor rushed past her shouting, "We're losing him." And she couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything except stand there in that Seoul hospital corridor with her white blouse soaked crimson and her heart shattering into pieces too small to ever put back together. The man dying behind those doors, the man whose blood was still warm on her palms, was the man she loved. And it was her fault. All of it, every broken, terrible thing that led to this moment, started because she had walked into his house 3 months ago and lied to his face for money. But let me back up. Let me take you to where this nightmare began, to the moment Aaliyah made a deal with the devil and didn't even know it. February in Manhattan was the kind of cold that made you question every life choice that brought you to the East Coast. Aaliyah sat in a hotel bar that smelled like expensive whiskey, across from a man who smiled with too many teeth. Oren Castellane, 50-something, silver hair, tailored suit, the kind of handsome that came with a price tag and a body count. He slid a folder across the table while she pretended her hands weren't shaking. $180,000. That's what her private investigation firm owed to creditors, to landlords, to everyone, thanks to her business partner who'd cleaned out their accounts and vanished 6 weeks ago. She had 30 days before everything she'd built collapsed. Oren knew this because predators always know when you're bleeding. Inside the folder were photographs of a man who made Aaliyah forget to breathe. Korean, early 30s, the kind of face that belonged in movies where beautiful people destroyed each other slowly. Baek Jiyul, tech CEO, Oren said in that smooth voice that probably worked on everyone. My business partner, and the man stealing millions from our AI security company. The job was simple, Oren explained, leaning back like they were discussing vacation plans instead of corporate espionage. Fly to Seoul, get hired as Jiyul's live-in housekeeper through an agency I control, spend 2 months finding proof of embezzlement, collect $200,000, save your dying business, go home. Easy, he said, and Aaliyah should have heard the lie in that word. Why me? She asked, even though desperation was already making the decision for her. Oren's smile widened. Jiyul's mother was Black American, from Atlanta, married his Korean father back in the 80s, caused quite the scandal. She died 2 years ago, and he's been, Oren paused deliberately, vulnerable ever since. You won't stand out? He might even trust you, especially someone who reminds him of what he lost. The manipulation was so naked it should have sent Aaliyah running, but rent was 3 weeks overdue, and her credit cards were maxed and sometimes drowning. People grab anchors thinking they're lifelines. She took the job, signed papers she barely read, accepted a plane ticket already printed with her name. Seoul hit different at night, all neon and noise, and a language that twisted around her ears like music she couldn't translate. The agency sent a car to take her to Seongbuk-dong, where old money hid behind gates and silence. Jiyul's house clung to a hillside, all glass and steel and clean lines that looked like loneliness made architectural. When he opened the door, Aaliyah forgot every lie she'd rehearsed. He was taller than his photos suggested, built lean under a white button-down with sleeves rolled to his elbows, and his face? God, his face was the kind that made you understand why people wrote poetry about bone structure and devastation. But it was his eyes that gutted her, dark and exhausted, and carrying some private grief that made her want to ask, "Who broke you?" before remembering she was about to make it worse. "You must be Miss Johnson," he said in English so perfect it made her credentials feel fake. "Welcome. I hope the flight wasn't too difficult." His voice was low, careful, like he was used to people breaking around him and had learned to gentle his edges. He showed her through the house, pointing out rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed Seoul like a painting, a kitchen that looked like no one cooked in it, a living room that felt like a museum. The whole time his hand rested on the stair railing, and she noticed it trembled, just slightly, like he was keeping something caged inside his chest. She noticed other things too. Expensive women's shoes by the entrance that looked untouched by human feet, a locked office with a biometric scanner that screamed secrets, the way he poured her tea with the kind of precision that came from someone teaching you that manners mattered. "Your room," he said, opening a door to a space bigger than her entire New York apartment. "If you need anything, I'm usually awake. Insomnia is," he paused, an old companion. Their eyes met and held for 3 seconds too long. Aaliyah felt something electric crack down her spine, Some awareness of him that had nothing to do with the job and everything to do with the way his gaze dropped to her mouth before he caught himself. "I'll let you settle in," he said, stepping back like proximity was dangerous. That night, Aaliyah texted Oren, "I'm in," and tried to ignore the guilt already eating through her stomach lining. What she didn't see was Jiyul in his bedroom, watching her on a security monitor, studying this beautiful stranger who just walked into his trap. His expression unreadable as he whispered to the empty room, "So it begins." The first week was a dance of deception. Aaliyah cleaned rooms that didn't need cleaning, cooked meals Jiyul barely touched, and searched his spaces when he left for work. Except Jiyul didn't keep normal hours. He'd leave at 8 in the morning and return at 9, leave at noon and come back at 2, patterns designed to keep her off balance. She'd scramble to look innocent, laundry in hand, heart hammering against her ribs, while he'd watch her with those sad knowing eyes and say nothing. The tension built like pressure behind a dam. Every time she passed him in the hallway, every accidental brush of shoulders, every moment he stood too close while showing her how he liked his coffee, she felt it, that pull, that dangerous magnetic thing that made her skin feel too tight. She reported to Oren every night. "No evidence yet. His finances look legitimate. I need more time." Oren's responses grew colder. "You're not looking hard enough. Check his laptop, his phone, his locked office. He's hiding it somewhere and you're letting him distract you. Don't forget what's waiting for you back home if you fail." But the real problem wasn't Oren's impatience. It was the way Aaliyah caught herself watching Jiyul when she shouldn't. The way he moved through the house without sound, like a ghost haunting his own life. The way he stood at the windows at 3 in the morning, silhouetted against Seoul's neon glow, looking like every sad song ever written about beautiful boys and the weight they carried. One morning, she found him in the kitchen before dawn, tie loose around his neck, hair disheveled, eyes red like he'd been crying or hadn't slept, or both. He startled when he saw her, then tried to smile and failed. "Coffee," he said. Like that explained why he looked wrecked. "Rough night?" Aaliyah asked before she could stop herself. "Something like that," Jiyul said, and when he reached past her for a mug, his arm brushed hers and they both froze. The contact was innocent, meaningless, nothing, but the way her body reacted was not. Heat flooded her skin where he'd touched, and she saw his pupils dilate, saw him register her sharp inhale, saw the exact moment he chose to step back. "Sorry," he murmured. "Don't be," Aaliyah said, and her voice came out rougher than intended. They stood like that, 3 feet apart, the air thick, with things neither could say. Then, Jiyul's phone buzzed and the spell broke, and he left without his coffee. Aaliyah spent the rest of the day telling herself to get it together. He's a job, a paycheck, possibly a criminal. Stop looking at his hands and wondering what they'd feel like on your skin. The storm rolled into Seoul on a Thursday night without warning, rain hammering the glass walls like fists, thunder shaking the foundation hard enough to rattle windows. Aaliyah was in the kitchen attempting dinner when the power cut out, plunging everything into darkness so complete she gasped. She heard him before she saw him, heard footsteps and then the scratch of a match, saw his face illuminated by candlelight as he approached. "The generator's down," Jiyul said quietly, setting candles on the counter. "We'll have to wait it out." "Are you okay with storms?" "I'm fine," Aaliyah lied, but her breathing had already gone shallow because she wasn't fine with darkness, with enclosed spaces, with the memory of being 9 years old and trapped in a basement during a tornado in Alabama while the world tried to kill her. "Your breathing changed," Jiyul observed, stepping closer. "You're afraid." I said, "I'm fine," but her voice shook, and suddenly he was right there, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something clean and dark and expensive that made her want to lean in and breathe deeper. "Hey," he said softly, and his hands came up slowly, giving her time to pull away, before settling on her shoulders. "You're safe. I promise, just breathe with me. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. She tried to focus on the counting, but all she could focus on was his hands, warm and solid through her thin shirt, his thumbs tracing small circles on her collarbone that he probably didn't realize were driving her insane. Her eyes adjusted to the candlelight and she found him already watching her, his face inches away, his gaze tracking from her eyes to her mouth and back up. "Better?" he asked, his voice dropping lower. And God, that voice did things to her that were completely inappropriate for an employer-employee situation. "Yeah," Aaliyah whispered, but she didn't step back, and neither did he. Thunder cracked overhead and she flinched, stumbling forward, and suddenly his arms were around her, pulling her against his chest, one hand sliding into her hair, and this was not professional, not appropriate, not anything except exactly where she wanted to be. She could feel his heartbeat against hers, racing just as fast, could feel the tension in his body like he was fighting himself. "I should," he started, but didn't finish the sentence. "You should what?" Aaliyah asked, tilting her head back to look at him. "Stop thinking about kissing you," Jiyul said, brutal honesty, and his hand tightened in her hair like he was trying to keep himself from doing exactly that. If you're watching this and your heart is racing, if you're desperate to know whether he kisses her and you haven't subscribed yet, we'll leave some of this unanswered in your mind. And you will be thinking about it all day without knowing what actually happened. So, I'm in full support of you subscribing to know what happens. What if I don't want you to stop thinking about it? Aaliyah heard herself say and watched his control fracture in real time. His eyes went dark, his grip on her tightened, and for 3 suspended seconds she thought he was going to do it. Thought she was going to find out what he tasted like, whether he kissed soft or rough, whether that careful control extended to how he touched women, or if it shattered completely. Then the lights flickered back on, and they sprang apart like teenagers caught sinning. Jiyul cleared his throat, running a hand through his hair that was already a mess from her almost touching it. "I apologize. That was completely inappropriate. You work for me and I..." "Don't?" Aaliyah interrupted, because she couldn't hear him apologize for the best almost of her entire life. "Just don't." He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. "Get some rest," he said finally. "Tomorrow we can pretend this didn't happen." But they both knew that was a lie. Aaliyah didn't sleep. She lay in bed replaying every second, the heat of his hands, the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious and dangerous, the rough honesty of, "I should stop thinking about kissing you." She pressed her fingers to her lips and imagined, wanted, ached. The next morning destroyed everything. Aaliyah was making coffee, still half lost in memories of almost kisses, when she heard the front door open, heard heels clicking on marble, heard a woman's voice call out in Korean, "Honey, I'm home," heard Jiyul respond in the same language. She turned to see a woman who looked like she'd walked out of a magazine spread, tall, elegant, perfect in a way that made Aaliyah suddenly aware of her Target jeans and messy bun. The woman walked straight to Jiyul and kissed his cheek, her arm sliding around his waist with the casual ownership of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. "You must be the new housekeeper," the woman said, switching to flawless English, her smile sharp enough to cut. "I'm Han Mireille, Jiyul's girlfriend." The word girlfriend hit Aaliyah like a physical blow, knocked the air from her lungs, made the room tilt sideways. She looked at Jiyul and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Guilty maybe, or resigned, or something worse. "Mireille," he said quietly, "this is Miss Johnson." "Call me Aaliyah," she managed, proud that her voice didn't shake, that she sounded professional instead of like her chest had just been hollowed out with a rusty spoon. Mireille smiled wider. "Aaliyah, pretty name. I'm sure you'll take excellent care of my Jiyul while I'm traveling for work. He gets so lonely in this big house all by himself." The possessive "my," the implication that Aaliyah was staff, the way Mireille's hand rested on Jiyul's chest, all of it was designed to mark territory, and it worked. Aaliyah wanted to vanish, wanted the floor to open up, wanted to unfeel everything she'd felt last night. "Excuse me," she said, and walked out before anyone could see her eyes burning. She locked herself in her bathroom and tried to breathe through the humiliation. "He has a girlfriend. Of course he has a girlfriend. You're the housekeeper. He almost kissed during a blackout because proximity and convenience. Nothing about you is special." She called Oren, needing to ground herself in the job, in reality. "There's a girlfriend?" she said when he answered. He didn't mention her. Oren's laugh was cold. Men like him never do Aaliyah. They collect people like trophies, use whoever's closest when they need something. You think you're special but you're just available, now focus. 2 months and you can leave all this behind. The words should have helped, should have rebuilt her walls. But instead, they made her feel worse because available felt like the truest thing anyone had said about her in years. That night, Jiyul found her in the garden, sitting on a stone bench in the cold because the house felt too small for both of them and her humiliation. He sat beside her without asking permission, keeping a careful foot of space between them. "Seoul can be lonely when you're far from home," he said quietly. "If you need to talk—" "I'm fine," Aaliyah said, but tears were already sliding down her face because she wasn't fine. She was a liar and a spy and stupid enough to catch feelings for a man who belonged to someone else. Jiyul didn't push, didn't ask what was wrong, just sat there in the dark, being solid and present and patient until she stopped crying. Then he did something that wrecked her. He started humming, low and soft, some melody that sounded like a lullaby, and his voice was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. "My mother used to sing that when I couldn't sleep," he said when he finished. "It's about finding home even when you're lost." "It's beautiful," Aaliyah whispered. "So are you," Jiyul said, then stood abruptly like he'd shocked himself. "I should go. Mireille is waiting." He left her sitting there with those words ringing in her ears. "So are you." And she didn't know what to do with them, where to put them, how to stop them from meaning everything. Week 3 and Aaliyah was losing her mind, caught between the job she needed to do and the feelings she needed to kill. She finally cracked Jiyul's laptop password, his mother's birthday found in a file labeled Important Dates. She waited until he left for a meeting, hands shaking as she opened his encrypted folders. The decryption software ran for 6 hours, 6 hours of pacing and nausea, and rehearsing how she'd feel when she found proof he was a thief. Relief? Probably. Vindication? Confirmation that beautiful men were always hiding ugly things? The files unlocked at 9 at night. She opened the first folder, and her entire world inverted. Financial records, shell companies, offshore accounts, millions moving through fake corporations, all of it meticulously documented. Except none of it pointed to Jiyul. Every single transaction traced back to Oren Castellane. Emails between Oren and someone marked K. S, discussing the Baek problem, discussing removal timelines, discussing how to frame him before he figures out what we've done. Aaliyah's hands went numb. She scrolled faster, finding more, finding everything. Oren had been embezzling for years, using Jiyul's father's company as his personal bank, and when Jiyul's father discovered it, when he threatened to go public, Oren had him killed. Car accident, brake failure, police report filed and closed in 48 hours. She was the weapon. The knife Oren was sliding between Jiyul's ribs while smiling about partnership and trust. She tried to call the FBI, her phone was disconnected. Tried her bank app, accounts frozen. An email from Oren appeared like he'd been watching, waiting. "You found it, clever girl. Now here's what happens next. You plant the evidence I'm sending you in Jiyul's system by tomorrow night, or I'll have you arrested for fraud the moment you land in America. Your partner signed documents with your forged signature. I've had them for 6 months. Decide quickly. The clock is ticking." The attachments loaded, fabricated bank transfers, falsified emails, perfect evidence that would send Jiyul to prison for decades, all requiring a few clicks to embed in his files. Her freedom for his destruction. Aaliyah ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left, then collapsed on the tile floor, shaking, ruined. That's where Jiyul found her 20 minutes later, still on the floor, tears streaked down her face, looking like the world had ended. He crouched beside her, keeping distance like she was breakable. "Whatever you found," he said gently, "I need you to tell me." "I can't," Aaliyah whispered. "Then let me start," Jiyul said, and his voice carried something that sounded like relief. "You're not really a housekeeper. You're a private investigator from New York. Oren Castellane hired you to find evidence I'm embezzling. You've been searching my house for 3 weeks. Aaliyah's head snapped up, shock replacing nausea. "Security cameras," Jiyul explained, his mouth twisting into something sad. "Everywhere. I've watched you photograph documents, try to crack my office, search my laptop. I've known since the day you arrived who you really are." The humiliation was acid in her throat. "Then why didn't you throw me out?" "Because I was falling in love with you," Jiyul said. Brutal honesty again, "and I needed to know if you'd figure out the truth or if you'd choose him." The air left Aaliyah's lungs. "You what?" I watched you hesitate every time you searched, watched you cry after phone calls with Oren, watched you choose the garden over staying near me because it hurt, he continued, and I kept hoping you'd see it. See him for what he really is. He killed your father, Aaliyah said, the words tumbling out. 3 years ago, the car accident. Oren cut the brake lines because your father found out about the embezzlement. It's all in your files. I know, Jiyul said simply. I've been building a case for 3 years. He stood, offered her his hand. She stared at it, at the choice he was offering, partnership instead of deception, truth instead of lies. She took his hand, let him pull her up, let herself stand too close enough to see exhaustion and hope and want in his dark eyes. Why would you trust me? She asked, after everything. Because you're here telling me instead of planting the evidence, Jiyul said, his free hand coming up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone, and because I saw the way you looked at me before you knew about Mireille. That wasn't fake. Mireille, Aaliyah started, but he was shaking his head. Is my half-sister? Jiyul finished. My father's daughter from before he married my mother. She found me 2 years ago. We've been investigating Oren together. The girlfriend thing is cover. Relief crashed through Aaliyah so hard her knees buckled. You're not. Never was, Jiyul confirmed, and then he kissed her like he'd been dying to for weeks, his mouth claiming hers, demanding, his hand sliding into her hair, his body crowding hers against the wall in a way that made her gasp and open for him and forget every reason this was a bad idea. She kissed back like she was starving, fingers clutching his shirt, pulling him closer until there was no space between them, until she could feel every hard line of him pressed against her and wanted more, more, more. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Jiyul pressed his forehead to hers. I'm sorry I let you think I was a criminal. I'm sorry I made you go through this. I'm sorry I came here to betray you, Aaliyah whispered. But you didn't, Jiyul said. That's what matters now. He kissed her again before she could think. Slower this time, thorough, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her mouth, the sound she made when his teeth caught her bottom lip, the way her fingers dug into his shoulders hard enough to leave marks. When they finally broke apart, both shaking, Jiyul grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the locked office she'd tried and failed to access for 3 weeks. The biometric scanner read his palm, and the door clicked open, revealing a room that looked nothing like the rest of the pristine house. The walls were covered in investigation boards, photographs connected by red string, financial documents layered 3 deep, surveillance images of Oren meeting with men in expensive suits and cheap alleys. This was a war room, obsession made visible. My father discovered Oren was selling our AI security technology to foreign governments, Jiyul explained, his hand still gripping hers like he was afraid she'd disappear. Military-grade encryption software, facial recognition systems, everything we built to protect people, Oren was auctioning to the highest bidder. When my father threatened to expose him, threatened to go to the international authorities, Oren had him killed. Jiyul's voice was steady, but his hand trembled, and Aaliyah squeezed tighter, grounding him. The police report said brake failure, mechanical malfunction, case closed in 48 hours. Jiyul continued, pulling up a document on his computer. But I paid a private investigator to examine the wreckage. The brake lines were cut clean, professional job, and the investigator who closed the case deposited $50,000 in his account the next week. He clicked through more files, building the story, showing her 3 years of meticulous evidence gathering, paper trails and recorded phone calls, and testimonies from former employees who'd watched Oren operate. It was comprehensive, damning, enough to bury Oren for life. Except, Jiyul said, and his jaw tightened, without the original partnership contract between my father and Oren, any decent lawyer can argue my father gave verbal permission for the profit sharing, can paint this as a business dispute instead of theft and murder. That contract is the kill shot, the one document that proves Oren had zero legal claim to company assets. Where is it? Aaliyah asked. Oren's hotel safe, Jiyul said. He's flying into Seoul tomorrow, staying at the Signial penthouse level, and he never travels without that contract, keeps it close like insurance. Then we steal it, Aaliyah said, and watched something like admiration flash across Jiyul's face. The door behind them opened and Mireille walked in, dropping her designer bag with a thud. the cold mask she'd worn earlier completely gone, replaced by a warm smile that transformed her entire face. "So she figured it out," Mireille said, looking between them. "Took her long enough." "Your acting is phenomenal," Aaliyah said, because the jealousy she'd felt watching Mireille touch Jiyul still burned in her chest. "Years of corporate law taught me how to lie with a smile," Mireille said. Then her expression softened. "I'm sorry I made you hurt, but we had to know if Oren sent you or if you were just caught in his web." "Both," Aaliyah admitted. "He knew exactly how desperate I was, knew my business was drowning, knew I'd take any lifeline even if it had hooks in it. That's what predators do," Mireille said quietly. "They find the wounds and press until you break. Our father," she gestured to Jiyul, "was the same way with my mother. Found her when she was vulnerable, made promises he never kept, disappeared before I was born. Jiyul found me 2 years ago through a DNA ancestry site. I wanted to know if I had siblings," Jiyul explained. "After my mother died, the loneliness was—" He paused, searching for words, crushing. "Finding Mireille saved me." The way he said it, raw and honest, made Aaliyah's chest tighten with something too big to name. They spent the next 4 hours building a plan around Jiyul's dining table, maps and schematics spread across the surface. Coffee going cold in forgotten mugs. Aaliyah would meet Oren at a restaurant, play the obedient asset, hand over the fabricated evidence on a USB drive while wearing a wire to catch his confession. While Oren was distracted, Mireille would break into his hotel suite, using credentials she'd obtained from a contact in hotel security. Crack the safe with codes she'd spent 6 months socially engineering from Oren's assistant, steal the contract, disappear before anyone noticed. Jiyul would run surveillance from a van parked 3 blocks away, monitoring both situations, ready to extract either of them if things went wrong. It was risky, maybe suicidal, built on too many variables they couldn't control. "If he suspects you flipped," Jiyul said to Aaliyah, his eyes dark with worry, "he'll kill you. Oren doesn't leave loose ends." "Then I won't give him a reason to suspect," Aaliyah said with more confidence than she felt. "If hotel security catches me," Mireille added, "I'll be arrested for corporate espionage, disbarred, probably deported." "Then don't get caught," Jiyul said. But his voice was tight. They kept planning, refining details, building contingencies until the sky outside started turning gray with pre-dawn light. Mireille finally stood, stretching, announcing she needed to sleep before tomorrow's chaos. She paused at the door, looking back at them with a knowing smile. "Use protection," she said cheerfully, and left before either could respond. The silence that followed was loaded, dangerous. Aaliyah was suddenly hyper-aware that they were alone, that Jiyul was looking at her like he had in the bathroom earlier. Hungry and conflicted and barely controlled. "You should sleep too," he said, his voice rough. "Should," Aaliyah agreed, but didn't move. Jiyul crossed the space between them in 3 steps, his hand sliding into her hair, tilting her face up. "If we do this," he said quietly, "if I touch you the way I've been dying to for 3 weeks, I won't be able to pretend tomorrow that you're just someone working for me. I won't be able to keep distance, keep perspective." "Good," Aaliyah said, and pulled him down to her mouth. This kiss was different, unleashed, his hands everywhere, her back against the wall, his thigh between her legs making her gasp into his mouth. She tugged his shirt free from his pants, kneading skin, and when her hands found the muscles of his back, he groaned against her throat, the sound vibrating through her entire body. "Bedroom," he managed, and she nodded, and somehow they made it up the stairs without falling, hands and mouths never separating, a trail of his shirt and her cardigan left behind. His bedroom was all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's skyline, but Aaliyah barely registered it because Jiyul was lowering her onto his bed, his body covering hers, his mouth doing devastating things to her neck that made her arch against him. "Tell me to stop," he said against her collarbone, even as his hand slid under her shirt, "and I will." "Don't you dare," Aaliyah said, and then there were no more words for a long time. Afterwards, wrapped in sheets that smelled like him, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow, Aaliyah felt something dangerous settle in her chest. This wasn't just physical, wasn't just attraction, this was the kind of feeling that ruined you for other people. "What are you thinking?" Jiyul asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That I'm terrified," Aaliyah admitted. Of tomorrow, of Oren, of how much I feel for you after 3 weeks. His arms tightened around her. I'm terrified too, but we're going to survive this. We're going to win. And then, he paused, then I'm going to ask you to stay. In Seoul? Aaliyah asked. With me? Jiyul corrected. Wherever that is. She fell asleep in his arms as the sun rose over Seoul, and for the first time since arriving in Korea, felt like she'd found something worth fighting for. The restaurant Oren chose was all glass walls and ambient lighting, designed to make murder look elegant, expensive, in that quiet way that rich people preferred. Aaliyah sat across from him in a black dress Mireille had provided, sleek and simple, the wire taped between her breasts itching like guilt. Her hands were steady through sheer force of will, her smile practiced in the mirror for an hour until it looked genuine. Oren looked exactly as she remembered, silver hair perfect, suit probably worth more than her car, smiling like they were old friends instead of predator and prey. I knew you'd make the right choice, he said, ordering wine without asking if she wanted any. The waiter poured and disappeared. Aaliyah slid the USB drive across the white tablecloth, her heart hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. Everything you asked for, she said. Bank transfers linking Jiyul to offshore accounts, falsified emails discussing profit extraction, travel records to countries with no extradition treaties, the whole package. Oren's eyes gleamed as he pulled out his laptop, plugging in the drive with the anticipation of a man about to watch someone's life collapse. Aaliyah sipped wine she couldn't taste and thought about Jiyul 3 blocks away, listening to every word, recording everything. Oren reviewed the files with the focused attention of a surgeon examining an incision, clicking through documents, nodding occasionally, his smile growing wider. 5 excruising minutes passed, 5 minutes where Aaliyah's palms sweated and her throat closed and she imagined every way this could go wrong. Finally, Oren closed the laptop. Excellent work, Aaliyah. Truly impressive. Your legal troubles will disappear by morning, and here, he slid an envelope across the table. A bonus for your professionalism, 50,000 cash. The envelope sat between them like a live grenade. What happens to Jiyul now? Aaliyah asked, keeping her voice curious instead of accusatory. Oren leaned back, swirling his wine. That's not your concern anymore. You've done your part. I suggest you take the first flight back to New York and forget you were ever here. But I'm curious, Aaliyah pushed, because she needed him to say it, needed the confession clear and unambiguous. What did he do that made you hate him this much? Oren's smile thinned. Hate is such a strong word. I don't hate Jiyul. I just can't allow him to exist as a threat. His father made the same mistake, got self-righteous, started asking questions about where money was going, threatened to audit the partnership. So you killed him, Aaliyah said, and her voice didn't shake, didn't betray the rage burning through her veins. The wineglass paused halfway to Oren's mouth. Excuse me. The car accident 3 years ago, Aaliyah continued, brake lines don't cut themselves. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Oren set down his glass with careful precision, his eyes going flat and cold, the charming mask sliding away to reveal something reptilian underneath. That's a very dangerous accusation, he said quietly. Is it an accusation if it's true? Aaliyah asked. You're wearing a wire, Oren said. Statement not question. Aaliyah's blood turned to ice. Did you think I'd walk into a meeting without taking precautions? Oren pulled out a tablet, turned it toward her, and Aaliyah's stomach dropped straight through the floor. On screen was live footage of Mirai in Oren's hotel suite, crouched in front of his safe, her hands working the electronic lock. Smile for the cameras, Oren said, his voice pleasant again in a way that made Aaliyah's skin crawl. I have security in every property I stay in. Did you really think I wouldn't be watching? He pressed a button on his phone. The men in my suite handle the intruder and make sure she doesn't leave. No. Aaliyah lunged across the table, grabbing for his phone, but Oren's security materialized from the shadows. 2 men built like concrete walls, hands like vices on her arms. The restaurant erupted into chaos. Jiyul crashed through the entrance, moving like violence personified, his fist connecting with the first guard's jaw before anyone could blink, the crack of bone audible over the screaming patrons. Aaliyah drove her heel into the second guard's instep, felt something crunch, twisted free, and smashed her wine bottle across his skull, glass and alcohol exploding in a crimson spray. Oren ran for the back exit. Jiyul was screaming into his phone, "Mireille, get out now!" But Mireille's voice crackled back through his earpiece. "I have the contract, but they're coming." And then static, then nothing. Aaliyah watched Jiyul's face drain of color, watched him make the impossible calculation, chase Oren or save his sister, watched him choose family. "Get Oren," he told her, his eyes meeting hers for one suspended heartbeat. "I'm getting Mireille. Don't let him escape, please." He was gone before she could argue, leaving her alone in a restaurant full of unconscious security and traumatized diners. Aaliyah ran. "If you're still with me, if your heart is racing and you need to know whether everyone survives this, whether love wins or whether Oren destroys them all, subscribe right now, my lovelies, because coming all the way down and not seeing how it ends is so devastating." Seoul at night was a maze of neon and noise, crowds that swallowed you whole if you weren't careful. Aaliyah chased Oren's expensive suit through streets and alleys, her heels abandoned somewhere behind her, feet slapping pavement, lungs burning with effort and fear. He was heading east toward the river, toward something, and she pushed harder, faster, because if he escaped, everything they'd sacrificed meant nothing. Her phone buzzed, Jiyul's name flashing. She answered without slowing. "Mireille's okay," he said, breathing hard. "I got to her. Guards are down. Police are coming. Where are you?" Chasing Oren toward the Han River, Aaliyah gasped out. "He's heading somewhere specific. I think he has an escape plan." "Private airfield," Jiyul said immediately. "East side, 30 minutes outside the city. I'm coming to you. Don't engage him alone. He's dangerous." "Too late," Aaliyah said, because Oren had just climbed into a black Mercedes, and she was already flagging down a taxi, throwing money at the driver, screaming, "Follow that car." The taxi driver looked terrified, but he drove, weaving through traffic with the reckless abandon of someone promised double fare. Aaliyah's phone rang again, Jiyul, and she could hear a car engine roaring in the background. "Aaliyah," he said, and her name in his voice made her chest hurt. "Please be careful. Please don't try to be a hero. Wait for me." "I'm not trying to be a hero," Aaliyah said, watching the Mercedes speed toward the highway. "I'm trying to finish what we started." She hung up before he could argue. The airfield was exactly what she expected. Isolated, expensive, designed for people who needed to disappear quickly. Oren's Mercedes pulled directly onto the tarmac, where a private jet sat with engines already running, escape within reach. Aaliyah's taxi screeched to a stop at the gate. She threw more money at the driver and ran, her bare feet on pavement, her dress torn from climbing out of the moving taxi, everything in her body screaming that this was stupid, reckless, suicidal. She didn't care. Oren was halfway up the jet's stairs when she cut him off, blocking his path, her chest heaving. "It's over," she said. He laughed, actually laughed, the sound echoing across empty tarmac. "Is it because, from where I'm standing, you're unarmed, alone, and about to watch me fly away while you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering when I'll come back to finish what I started?" "The contract," Aaliyah said. "Mireille has it. Your signature proving you embezzled from Jiyul's father. It's already in police custody." Oren's face twisted into something inhuman, rage replacing the charming mask completely. "Then I have nothing to lose." He pulled a gun from his jacket, small and black, and pointed directly at her chest, and Aaliyah realized with crystalline clarity that she was about to die on a runway in South Korea, alone, for a man she'd known for 3 weeks. She also realized she didn't regret any of it. "You should have stayed in New York," Oren said, and his finger moved to the trigger. The gunshot cracked across the airfield. Aaliyah felt the impact like being hit by a truck, her chest exploding in pain, her body thrown backward, the sky spinning above her in nauseating circles. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything except think stupidly that dying hurt worse than movies made it look. She heard Oren drop too, heard footsteps running, heard Jiyul's voice screaming her name with a desperation that broke something in her chest worse than the bullet. Then his face was above hers, tears streaming down his cheeks, his hands ripping open her dress, and his expression shifted from devastation to shock to relief. So profound he started sobbing. "The vest," he gasped. "You're wearing the vest. Mireille made you wear it. Oh God, you're wearing it." The bulletproof vest Mireille had insisted on, hidden under the dress, had stopped the bullet embedded in Kevlar instead of her heart. But the broken ribs were immediate and agonizing, each breath a knife, her vision graying at the edges. "Can't breathe," Aaliyah managed. I know. Stay with me," Jiyul said, his hands gentle on her face, his tears falling on her cheeks. "Ambulance is coming. You're going to be okay. You have to be okay. I can't lose you." "Oren," she gasped out. "Unconscious," Jiyul said, gesturing to where Oren lay 10 feet away, a tranquilizer dart in his neck. "I shot him before he could realize you were still alive." Police cars screamed onto the tarmac, sirens wailing, lights strobing red and blue across Jiyul's stricken face. Paramedics swarmed, pushing Jiyul aside, loading Aaliyah onto a stretcher, and she tried to tell them she was fine, but her ribs screamed and her vision tunneled, and then there was just darkness. She woke in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and crushed dreams. Her chest wrapped so tight she could barely expand her lungs, morphine making everything soft around the edges. Jiyul was asleep in the chair beside her bed, his hand wrapped around hers, his face pressed against their joined fingers, looking like he'd aged a decade in however many hours had passed. "Hey," she whispered, her throat raw. He jolted awake, his eyes red and swollen, and the relief that crashed across his face made her want to cry. "You're awake," he said, his voice wrecked. "You've been out for 18 hours. They had to sedate you. You kept trying to pull out your IV." "Sounds like me," Aaliyah said, attempting a smile that turned into a wince when her ribs protested. 3 broken ribs, severe bruising, mild concussion, Jiyul recited like he'd memorized the doctor's report. "You'll be in pain for weeks, but you're alive. You're here." "Oren?" she asked. "Arrested," Jiyul said, and something dark and satisfied crossed his face. The wire recording, the contract Mireille stole, financial evidence, witness testimony, they're charging him with embezzlement, fraud, corporate espionage, and first-degree murder of my father. The prosecutor says he's looking at 25 years minimum. "Good," Aaliyah said. Then, Mireille, bruised but fine, she's downstairs charming the police into letting her leave. Apparently she's dating one of the investigators. Jiyul's smile was weak but real. "And us?" Aaliyah asked. Jiyul's smile faded into something serious, something that made her breath catch despite the pain. "I almost lost you," he said quietly. "I watched you get shot, watched you fall, and for 3 seconds before I realized you were wearing the vest, I felt my entire world end." He stood, carefully sat on the edge of her bed, his hand coming up to cup her face with devastating gentleness. "I don't care that we've only known each other 3 weeks," he continued. "I don't care that this started with lies. I don't care about any of it, except that you're alive, and you're here, and I love you. I'm completely in love with you. And I need you to know that before you decide whether to stay or go." The morphine made everything feel surreal, but this, his confession, the way he looked at her like she hung the moon and stars, this felt more real than anything in her entire life. "I'm not going anywhere," Aaliyah said, reaching up to touch his face, her thumb brushing away tears he didn't seem to notice he was crying. "I love you too. I'm insane and reckless, and this is probably the morphine talking, but I love you and I want to stay. I want to build something here with you." He kissed her then, soft and careful, mindful of her injuries, but thorough enough to make her forget about broken ribs and ruined dresses and the fact that she'd been shot less than a day ago. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "No more getting shot," he said. "No promises," Aaliyah said, and he laughed, broken and relieved and beautiful. "Here's a question for you. Have you ever loved someone enough to take a bullet for them, loved them enough to burn your old life down, and start over in a foreign country?" Because Aaliyah just did exactly that, and she's about to find out if the gamble pays off. 2 months passed in a blur of healing and legal proceedings and learning how to build a life from scratch. Aaliyah's ribs healed slowly, painfully, each breath a reminder of how close she'd come to dying. Oren's trial dominated Korean news. Cameras camped outside the courthouse, reporters screaming questions that Jiyul and Mireille declined to answer with matching corporate smiles. The evidence was overwhelming, the verdict inevitable. 26 years for embezzlement, fraud, corporate espionage, and the murder of Baek Jiyul, Jiyul's father. The judge had been thorough, methodical, clearly unimpressed by Oren's expensive legal team. Aaliyah watched the sentencing from Jiyul's living room, his arm around her shoulders, Mireille on her other side with champagne already open. When the judge's gavel fell, when Oren was led away in handcuffs screaming about appeals and injustice, something in Aaliyah's chest finally unclenched. "It's over," she said. "It's over," Jiyul agreed and kissed her temple. Her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant back in New York. "The firm is thriving. 8 new clients this month. We're officially profitable. You were right to stay in Seoul." Jiyul had invested in her business as a silent partner, had connected her with corporate clients in Korea who needed investigators with American credentials, had essentially built her a second office without her asking. "Speaking of staying," Mireille said, pouring 3 glasses, "I have news." She slid a folder across the coffee table, official-looking documents with government seals. Aaliyah opened it, found a work visa application, already approved, valid for 3 years with option to extend. "You did this?" Aaliyah asked, looking at Mireille. "We did this," Mireille corrected, gesturing to include Jiyul. "Your family now, family stays." The word family hit Aaliyah unexpectedly hard, made her eyes burn because she'd spent so much of her life alone, building walls, trusting no one, and now she had this, a found family built from lies that became truth. "Thank you," she managed, and Mireille hugged her, careful of still tender ribs. That night, Jiyul took Aaliyah to the rooftop garden she hadn't known existed, accessible only through a hidden door in his bedroom. Seoul spread out below them, neon and noise and millions of lives happening simultaneously, beautiful in its chaos. "I want to show you something," Jiyul said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Aaliyah's heart stopped. "If that's a ring, I swear to God." "It's not a ring," Jiyul laughed, opening the box to reveal a key, simple and silver. "It's a key to this house, to my life, to everything I have. I'm not asking you to marry me after 2 months. I'm asking you to move in, to stop pretending your room downstairs is where you sleep when we both know you haven't spent a night there in 6 weeks. You're asking me to live with you," Aaliyah said. "I'm asking you to build a home with me," Jiyul corrected. "Here in Seoul, or New York, or anywhere you want, as long as we're together." Aaliyah took the key, felt its weight in her palm, felt the enormity of what he was offering. A life, a future, a choice to stay instead of run. "Yes," she said simply. He pulled her into his arms, kissed her under Seoul's polluted stars, and Aaliyah thought about the girl who'd stepped off a plane 3 months ago, desperate and lying and convinced love was something other people got. She thought about how wrong she'd been. 6 months after the trial, Aaliyah stood in her new office in Gangnam, nameplate on the door reading Johnson Investigations, Korean and English, walls covered in case files and certificates, windows overlooking a city that finally felt like home. Mireille was her business partner now, handling the corporate law side while Aaliyah ran investigations, a partnership built on trust and shared trauma and genuine friendship. Her phone rang, Jiyul's name flashing, and she answered with a smile already forming. "Dinner tonight," he said. "I'm cooking." "You can't cook," Aaliyah pointed out. "I'm learning," Jiyul defended. "Mireille sent me YouTube tutorials. How hard can japchae be?" "Should I bring a fire extinguisher?" Aaliyah asked. "Bring wine and low expectations," Jiyul said, and she could hear his smile through the phone. She arrived home, because that's what Jiyul's glass house had become. Home, to find the kitchen filled with smoke and Jiyul waving a towel at the smoke detector while Mireille filmed the whole thing on her phone. "You said you were learning," Aaliyah said, trying not to laugh. "I am learning," Jiyul insisted. "I'm learning that cooking is harder than it looks, and we should probably order takeout." They ended up on the rooftop with fried chicken and beer. The 3 of them, watching Seoul's neon heartbeat, telling stories and laughing until Aaliyah's ribs ached, for good reasons instead of bad. "Any regrets?" Jiyul asked later. After Mireille had left and they were alone under the stars. Aaliyah thought about it, really thought, considered the path that had led her here, the lies and fear, and that moment on the tarmac when she'd thought she was dying. "Not a single one," she said honestly. "Even the part where you got shot?" Jiyul asked. "Especially that part," Aaliyah said, "because without it I wouldn't have known how much you loved me, wouldn't have seen you fall apart at the thought of losing me, wouldn't have understood what we were building was worth dying for." "Don't make it a habit," Jiyul said, pulling her closer. "No promises." Aaliyah said again, and he laughed and kissed her, and they stayed like that until the sun started rising over the city they'd chosen together. Back at the house, Jiyul pulled her onto the couch and said, "Marry me?" Aaliyah blinked. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated. "I know I said I wouldn't ask yet. I know it's only been a year, but life is short and fragile, and I don't want to waste another second not being your husband." He wasn't on his knee. There was no ring, no planned speech, just raw honesty and hope and love. "Yes," Aaliyah said. Because what else was there to say to the man who'd seen her at her worst and loved her anyway, who'd trusted her when she was lying, who'd built her a life when she'd come to destroy his? They got married 3 months later, small ceremony, just Mireille and a few close friends, in a garden overlooking Seoul. Aaliyah wore white, and Jiyul cried during his vows, and Mireille gave a speech about found family that left everyone sobbing. And if you made it all the way to the end of this story, if you felt every heartbeat and fear and moment of hope right alongside Aaliyah and Jiyul, do me one last favor and subscribe. Because leaving now without subscribing after everything we've been through together would honestly break my heart. So please, hit that button, join this community, and let's find more stories that wreck us in the best possible ways together.